Dancing the Self into Being. Singkil as AutoMythos in the work of Catherine Hernandez. She has so much motherfucking swag that she's able to walk through the debris with the grace of her lineage. Femme Playlist, page 12. To begin, I suppose I would be remiss to do a presentation on Filipino Canadian AutoMythos without sharing a bit about myself and how I have come to this work. My name is Giorelle Diokno, and I'm currently a PhD candidate at the University of Toronto. I currently reside in Toronto, known as Toronto to many, the land of the Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, Gatun, Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit. I am a 1.5 generation Canadian, a citizen, and I have lived in Canada for almost 8 years. Before coming to Canada, I'd also been blessed with the opportunity to live in the East Bay, Northern California, the land of the Yakutsk people of the San Joaquin Valley, for 7 years. My background is Filipino, and I come from the province of Rizal, which is part of the Calabarzon region, southeast of Metro Manila. I speak Tagalog and no other dialects, despite my mother's family hailing from Batangas and speaking Batangueño. My father's family, on the other hand, comes from Cavite, and to my knowledge, his family speaks no dialect. Reared in lower middle class Filipino society, English was my first language, conditioned by my parents' belief in the mastery of unaccented English as a boon for upward social mobility. Apart from English and Tagalog, I'm conversational in French and know a bit of Spanish. I identify as Filipinx, queer, non-binary, and use he, him pronouns. I like the many shades of teal, love corgis, and own a 15-inch bunny named Bibi. Now that you've heard a little bit about me, what does this have to do with my work? My research explores how Filipinx Canadian performance represents being Filipina, Filipino, Filipinx in Canada, particularly in the use of folk aesthetics to tell stories about ourselves. Different from the biographical particulars around migration, my project focuses on the gravitation to folk aesthetics as a site for identity. The location of decolonial ethos within the folk participates in what Filipinx Canadian social geographers J.P. Katungal and May Forales call the race to indigeneity. Quote, the practice of centering indigeneity in migrant decolonial politics that desires a return towards a specific historical geography before Filipino-ness, end quote. Such a centering of indigeneity in migrant decolonial politics informs decolonial diasporic aesthetics, defined by Filipino Canadian scholar Marissa Largo as, quote, responsive to the subordination of racial, sexual, and cultural difference within the framework of national and neoliberal ideologies, end quote. End quote, not simply the recuperation of pre-colonial culture, but an active process of creation that works within and pushes against the limiting imaginaries of the colonial settler nation, unquote. Despite good intentions in the search for diasporic subjectivity, the appropriation of indigeneity within the Filipino diasporic context leads to reliance on, quote, the construction of a Filipino indigeneity on offer to all Filipinos in the diaspora, leading to uncritical embrace of signs, symbols, and cultural practices despite their regional and cultural specificity, end quote. The desire for specific historical geography before Filipino-ness produces what I refer to in my larger project as the figure of the folk, an abject fetish that accrues indices of a Filipino indigenous body and becomes a metonym for identity in the diaspora. The figure of the folk comes out of a protracted history of the Filipino indigenous body extracted from its context. First, in service of Spanish colonial discourses of race and civility, then later mobilized as national mythos through folkloric culture to rebuff American imperial influence, and later still, used to assert a national identity on the global stage and in the diaspora. To clarify what I mean by the folk, dance scholar Kanami Namiki's distinction between folk dances and folk dances helps somewhat in this regard. Folk space dances are Expressive forms involving human body movement that are practiced in the context of community life, while folk no-space dances are representations of folk space dances that are performed for the stage. Furthermore, Philippine music scholar Christiane Castro aligns the latter with the folkloric, consisting of, quote, performance practices and the associated material culture deriving from the folk but recontextualized for audiences, end quote. Although not a hard and fast rule on the use of folk space dance as opposed to folk no space dance, Namiki's distinctions inform my use of the folk, in this case the aestheticized derivations of community practices that come to form Filipino folk dance as a genre. I've given you a quick rundown of the project, but what exactly does this have to do with AutoMythos in the work of Catherine Hernandez? The details that I shared with you in the beginning would be considered autobiographical in nature, but not so much in the sense of a mythos, defined by Oxford Lexico as, quote, a traditional or recurrent narrative theme or plot structure or a set of beliefs or assumptions about something, end quote. My use of automythos draws from Black and Indian American artist Makita Ahuja's automythography, a strategy she uses to counter limiting frameworks she encounters given her bicultural identity. Quote, it is the expansive and inclusive process of self-construction and self-representation, a creative form in which I gain and enact my agency, end quote. For those of you familiar, you must be wondering, how is this any different from Audre Lorde's biomythography? Definitely an inspiration behind Ahuja's automythography, Lorde's use of mythic elements in a biographical narrative differs from my exploration of how folk dance becomes a means to conceptualize a mythos, an assertion of subjecthood and politics within existing frameworks of nation and culture. In particular, this presentation examines the role of Singkil as automythos in the Femme playlist by Catherine Hernandez. One of the many dances that make up the Filipino folk dance repertoire, the Singkil tells the story of Princess Gandigan's escape and eventual rescue by Prince Bantugan from peril. Filipino historian Artemio R. Guillermo describes Singkil as a, quote, famous dance of Muslim Mindanao, characterized by vivid colors and rhythmic movements, end quote, which recounts the epic legend Darangan of the Maranao people. Looking further into the Darangan epic, the legend dates back to the 14th century, and along with the Maharaja Rawana, comprises an indigenized Maranao version of the Hindu epic Ramayana, although the original polytheistic accounts were restated and transformed to conform to monotheistic Islam. Despite the Singkil not being religious or Muslim, but in fact secular in nature, the Bayanihan Dance Company includes the Singkil as part of the Muslim suite, a collection of dances meant to represent the southern region of Mindanao. Philippine dance scholar Monica Santos notes that Bayanihan, designated as, quote, the Philippine National Folk Dance Company, end quote, compiles folk dances into 4 suites meant to represent an array of cultures. The Cordillera Suite, non-Christian groups in the northern Philippines, the Muslim Suite, Islamicized groups in the southern Philippines, the Maria Clara or Hispanic Suite, and the Lowland Filipino Suite, both of which represent Christianized communities in the country. As a dance adaptation of a pre-Islamic indigenized epic that also documents Maranao history, society, and culture, the Singkil holds a rich mythos behind its origin as a cultural practice. However, the incorporation of the dance into Filipino folk dance repertoire as part of the Muslim suite simplifies this mythos, excising cultural specificity in favor of regional representation. Philippine dance anthropology scholar Joel Jacinto criticizes such a simplification, describing Muslim dances as, quote, an orientalizing generalization of cultural communities that practice Islam but are culturally variegated. The conflation between region and religion plays a discursive role in that the development of Filipino folk dance as a national genre, quote, renders particular ethnicities as representatives of fixed temporal points in the country's cultural history, end quote. Santos further argues that such a salvage anthropology approach suggests an imagined continuity from indigenous to modern cultures in its distinctions based on perceptions about the degree of Christianization or Westernization of particular dances or dance forms. Given Singkil's historical mythos as cultural practice and national mythos as Filipino folk dance, how exactly does Catherine Hernandez use it as an AutoMythos? In the case of the Femme playlist, Catherine Hernandez's citation of Singkil does not aspire for specific historical geography before Filipino-ness to situate her identity, as Katunggal and Faralis would say. Rather, it is through her relationship to the dance in the play's contemporaneous present that anchors her queer femme politics. Depicting episodes of queer discovery, intimate Singkil lessons with her mother, and even traumatic periods in her life, Hernandez describes the Femme playlist as, quote, the journey of a closeted woman to body-proud queer femme told through the lattice of a music playlist, end quote. The playwright's notes indicate that the idea of the play is to, quote, to make it intensely personal, based on the playlist of the actor's life, end quote, encouraging the actor to insert their personal information, quote, wherever there are prompts in square brackets, end quote. Hernandez only insists that given the narrative, the main character, she, should be of Filipino descent, apparent, and queer. It is within this dialectic between the actor and the playwright that an AutoMythos around Singkil comes to the fore. The way in which Hernandez mobilizes the Singkil differs from traditional Filipino folk dance in its lack of prescriptiveness, both as a dance and as a metonym for culture. In a direct mode of address, she identifies the princess in the legend as the, quote, first femme I had ever known, end quote. She highlights the internalized misogyny in how the, quote, Diwata fairies get so jealous of the princess's intense beauty that they make the earth shake and the bamboo trees fall at her feet, end quote. The critical orientation to the legend continues with the mention of the Singkil prince who saves the princess as an addition by Spanish colonizers and ends with the following sentiment, quote, the story was of a woman who saved herself. The prince did sweet fuck all to help, end quote. In framing the prince in this manner, Hernandez's retelling of the Singkil differs from the Darangan legend itself. Unfortunately, I have not had the chance to interview Catherine Hernandez herself to probe the origin of this perspective on the legend, but it would suffice to say that her perspective does not adhere to the narrative as told by Filipino folk dance. In this case, the citation of the Singkil is not motivated by a pre-colonial aspiration in search of identity. Rather, Hernandez's personal perspective on the Singkil itself foregrounds her relationship to the dance, drawing meaning from this connection with the princess figure, which then informs her queer femme politics. Aside from reorienting the narrative of the Singkil, Catherine Hernandez resists the reinscription of choreography as well. In the playwright's notes, Hernandez directs the reader, quote, please refer to the script to understand the traditional Filipino dancing, end quote. However, throughout the course of the play, there are no explicit instructions or dance notations on how to dance Singkil. Instead, there are excerpts of Singkil lessons with her mother, one of which highlights the synergy between dancer and music. Ma, anak, ready ka na? She, yes, ma. Mom plays the kolindang. She fan dances. Mom, go back. Your fan dancing is choppy. Sandali lang. Pause. Anak, do you know Paula Abdul? You know how she choreographs, right? She listens to the music and she decides what movements go with the music, di ba? Pause. Well, in Filipino folk dance, we do not do that. See, I'll play this, and you might move your fans in striking staccato movements. Then you might respond with this. We play off each other, di ba? The audience will never know who is leading whom, the musician or the dancer. Now stomp. 3 times. Sige na. Stomp with the bottom of your foot so that the fairies can hear your ankle bells. You mean business. You're serious. Now walk through the bamboo. Chin up, eyes down. This description does not give much of a choreography, but more of an approach and an attitude to performing the Singkil. As opposed to prescribing choreography, Hernandez foregrounds an ethos around dancing the Singkil as a means to, quote, understand the traditional Filipino dancing, end quote. Within the dramaturgical context of the actor source playlist, Hernandez defers the music to the performer, albeit involving the kulintang, a Southeast Asian gong ensemble, which creates opportunities for different soundscapes within which the character of she dances the Singkil. Foregoing strict prescriptions of choreography and music, the Femme playlist does not reproduce the Singkil as the popular folk dance known the world over, but creates an alternate performance thereof, taking on its own meaning through a personal connection articulated by Hernandez, her own AutoMythos. Although contingent on Hernandez's life as told in the play, the AutoMythos centers her tumultuous experience as a queer femme as opposed to the narrative arc of her life, and opens up this experience for other queer femme Filipinx performers to explore, as though a queer myth of their own. The Femme playlist ends with what I take to be a litany exalting she's queer femme experience and punctuated with the performance of the Singkil. Mom, now walk through the bamboo, chin up, eyes down. Shift. She holds the fans in her hands. She looks at the audience, proud. She. I am a goddess born of years of scar tissue and a pile of paper stacked high with words that have blessed and cut me. I am a conduit of the whispers of the universe, a dancer to a beat so strong, slicing air thick with praise for the woman I have become. I am among sisters whose braids and hips and breasts and song make me impervious to your bullshit. Make me languish in the smell of me, delighting in the mess of my femme trails, of lipstick, of nail polish, of pussy, of sweat, of chocolate, spice, and everything us. We are the superhuman who reside just inches from the word victim on the side of survivor, moving to the rhythm of falling cards and moons in the house of us. We allow ourselves to be sexy and proud, slutty and loud, queer and brown. Say something. She stomps 3 times. She dances the Singkil and leaves the stage. The end. As the only other occurrence of the Singkil in the text, the lessons she has with her mother culminate in a statement, an articulation of identity and experience to convey, quote, you're serious, you mean business, end quote. Through Hernandez's dramaturgy, the Singkil transforms from an embodied national culture to an embodied experience of queer femme salvation, rescripting the mythos behind the dance for other queer femme Filipinx. It is within this new sense of meaning, through the citation of the Singkil, that I locate what I've come to call the radical object, performances of the folk in ways that redefine tradition and propose possibilities for redefining or defining Filipino Canadian subjectivity. Such redefinitions and renegotiations assert meaning within the flawed product of nationalist preservation and commodification. Despite all this, an aporia remains. At the root of performances of the folk, a recursive return to an extracted, fetishized Filipino indigenous body takes place. As extracted bodies used to signify national culture, these figures of the folk become doubly troubled when enacted in the context of Canadian settler colonialism. I have no resolution to this aporia at present. However, I'm inclined to extend this aporia to you all as well. In Yana Mirzan's incoming president's message to CATR members, she acknowledges the, quote, importance of the initiatives in indigenizing the academy that the organization has already put forward, end quote. Circling back to Katungal and Farala's concerns around the race to indigeneity, parallel questions arise in relation to Mirzan's statement. What does it mean to indigenize? What does it mean to indigenize the academy? What do such initiatives desire in their turn to indigeneity, and for what purpose? In turning these questions inward, I extend their concern for settler colonialism within Filipino diasporic decolonial projects to the work of the association as a whole, to the very work that we do as academics. Again, we may not have the answers at present, but it is definitely something to think about, to think through in our work and in ourselves. And with this discomfort, I take my leave.